Hey there, welcome back to Bioethics. Um, Today I've got a few things that we're going to do. One is I'm going to give you a prompt for your journals. Um, Actually, it's a two-part prompt, so there's a few things that I want you to respond to. And I'm going to do some housekeeping. That is always going to come first. So, housekeeping. Journals. There's been a few of you who've asked questions about um, just exactly how to get your journals right. And I understand that the anxiety that comes with any assignment in college, like you want it to be exactly right because there's some teachers who are going to be like, well, if you look at the syllabus, I said very specifically, you didn't do this right, and now your grade is screwed, even though you spent your whole semester trying really hard. I'm not that sort of teacher, but I do appreciate the desire for clarity. So let me make it as like clear and simple as I can with the journals. You have one due for every day of class that's listed on the syllabus. And what you should do for each of those is you should write your own reflections, your own thoughts out on the page about um, the material that we covered either in the reading or in the lecture. Now, I often give prompts for, when we're doing the lectures, I often give a prompt for your journals. Do that. If I give a prompt, follow the prompt, but also write your little bullet points or notes or questions or whatever else you have in your head about the other material as well. There's not a length requirement, it just has to be substantive. Like, I can tell when you go in and you're just trying to knock it out by writing one paragraph, and that's not really fulfilling the idea of the exercise. The exercise really will reap some substantial benefit for you if you do it, and if you just go in and try to knock it out with a paragraph, it won't. So I'm going to get on you about that and say, hey, actually sit down and follow your thoughts out, right? If you have a question in your head that comes up during the reading, follow that question. Think about possible ways it might be answered. Think about what information you would need to know in order to answer it. Write those things down. So it is mental work. If you're not doing actual mental work on the page, that's not the exercise. But so far, everybody's doing okay. You're doing fine. It's like I'm doing it sort of pass fail, I think, and everybody's passing, so that's an A. But for those assignments that don't come off as substantive or seem like just quick four sentences rattled off, that's probably not going to count in the end when I tally up all the journal entries that you did do. That might be half credit or something. So I guess it's not really pass fail. So yeah, one per class each week, so that's 2 a week. Each one should focus on the material covered that week. And if I give a prompt in the lecture, do that. Let's see, videos. Several of you have turned in your videos for your supplemental reading presentations. Good job. I haven't watched them yet, but I will watch them and I'll give you feedback. The one thing that I want those of you who have done, and I guess everybody, but especially those of you who have already uploaded your video, what I want you to do is go back and look at the instructions I gave on how to name your video. It's that way of naming it does a lot of work for me, figuring out how to grade it and how to count it as done or not. So I didn't put that information in there just to be, really particular. I put it in there because it's actually important. So go back and rename your video if you didn't do it right. And about half of you have not done it right. So get on that. Papers. A few of you have asked questions about when we're going to start doing these short papers. By the end of this week, I'm going to have a prompt up for you. I've already written the prompt out on notebook paper, and I just have to type it into a file, turn it into a PDF for you. But those should be up by the end of the week, and we'll talk about them next week. I've got some recommendations for you, but I'll give those to you at the end because, yeah, we're gonna end kind of heavy on the prompt that I'm giving you, and then we can end lightly after that. So here's the prompt. I said there's 2 parts to this prompt for your journals. The topic in the readings, which you absolutely should do for this class, are Well, the general topic is truth-telling with your patients, and specifically, is it ever okay to lie to people who are in your care, whether you're a doctor or attending nurse or a social worker or something like that? I think most of us have the intuition that, I mean, maybe there's some cases where it's okay to lie, but in the vast majority of general cases, no, you should not lie to people about their own health. Uh, but really, I think the more interesting question is not whether you should tell the truth or not, but how you should go about telling the truth. How much of the truth is really important, and what pieces uh, are the ones that are important, and how do we sort of translate that into language that people who aren't specialists in medicine or social work or whatever can understand and make a decision based on. So I want to give you a prompt that sort of highlights that difficulty. The question about truth telling and whether it's okay to just blatantly lie isn't all that interesting. I think the cases where it is okay to blatantly lie to people are going to be very extreme, and it's hard to give general guidance in extreme cases because they require so much individual thought. I mean, every case really does. But a case where it's hard to tell exactly what sort of truth to tell the person is much more common and much more interesting to think about. So I want to give you a case. I'm calling this case Mr. and Mrs. Mosley. This is based loosely on a couple that I encountered, and they're fascinating. So they're in their late 30s to early 40s. They're they've been together for quite a long time, over a decade. And what's interesting about this couple is that they're both intellectually disabled. The term, which I think is actually a pretty good descriptive term, but that's become co-opted by offensive people. You would normally have called them mentally retarded up until the last year or so. They're not severe though, to the point that they can't function. You know, they can speak language, they can speak English, not very articulately, but they can speak. You could have a conversation with them. They can hold down very menial jobs. In fact, both of them actually hold the same job at two different schools near their house. They're both janitorial workers or custodial workers at a middle school and a high school that are both within walking distance of their home. So they adorably take lunch breaks, walk home to have lunch with each other, and then walk back to the schools where they do janitorial work. They're like the most lovely three people maybe you're ever going to meet. Let's see what other background information is important about them. Let's say their IQ is about 60 if you need a benchmark for that. But Mr. and Mrs. Mosley are, so they can function, they can live together and do their own shopping and things. They have to call an Uber, but they know how to do that. They don't have driver's licenses. But they have a social worker who comes about once a week to check on them and make sure they're doing things like keeping their house clean and make sure they, have things like their taxes paid, which are difficult for them to understand, and all those sorts of boring adult tedious things the social worker helps with. But apart from those things, they can live pretty independently. So Mr. and Mrs. Mosley, though, have been brought by their social worker to their yearly physical checkup. And in the physical checkup, Mr. Mosley complained of testicular pain. And after some investigation, it turns out that he has the beginnings, the very clear beginnings of testicular cancer. Now, the treatment for this is there's no good option really, but the standard is to just remove the testicles. If that's where the cancer is located, if you remove them, you have a very good chance of it not spreading to other areas. There are lymph nodes near the groin that it could spread to, and if it gets there, it could just kill you very quickly. So it's great that we've discovered this cancer early, but it sucks because really the only thing you can do is take the person's testicles. Now, what happens when you do that is, number one, a significant proportion of your testosterone, if you're male and you have your testicles removed, your testosterone production goes down very significantly, which means that you're going to have a much lower sex drive. You're going to probably feel a lot less energetic. Um, you might have estrogen production take over some of the influence on your body. You might lose body hair. You might some men even start growing breasts if they have already high estrogen levels. It's a lot of things can happen, but the probably most significant irreversible thing is that your sex life is going to be impacted pretty severely. And Mr. and Mrs. Mosley are sexually active. They Miss Mosley has an IUD. They don't intend to have children. Uh, the topic of a vasectomy has been broached with Mr. Mosley, but he just doesn't like talking about it. They don't have any kids. They aren't planning on it, and the social worker thinks that he's using condoms consistently. So far, they've been together for like 10 years, and it's been fine. But we need to explain to him the situation and explain it to him with enough clarity that he can understand what's happening and make an informed decision. He's not legally the person who has the final say about his own medical decisions. The social worker or the state can make those final calls, but we think that he's competent enough to understand the information and give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, because basically the decision is get this cancer removed, get your testicles removed, or you're probably going to die, and it's going to be an extremely unpleasant death. The one good thing about testicular cancer is that when you have your testicles removed, they have prosthetic testicles that they can implant into the scrotum and seal the scrotum back up, and they will feel, at least like to the touch, it will feel as if there are testicles in there. So this introduces one unusual possibility, is that it will be possible to do this surgery on him and replace his testicles and him not know that they've been replaced. And that's an idea that some people in this discussion, one of the physician's assistants in this discussion actually suggested. Maybe we just explain to him that there's cancer down there, we need to take the cancer out, and it means he won't be able to have kids, but we don't actually need to explain to him that the testicles themselves are going to be removed. We can explain to him the effects that this will have, that his hormone levels will change, but we have hormone replacement therapy that we can put him on. He would need to be compliant with it. He would need to take a daily medication. He would also need to come in regularly for hormone injections, but it's something that his social worker thinks is possible to do. That shouldn't be, off the table. So here's the question. What do you need to tell Mr. and Mrs. Mosley in order to have them fully informed about the things that matter about his condition, about the things that matter about the possible responses to it? There's only two: death or removal. And specifically, do you need to explain to him that a particular piece of anatomy is going to be taken out if he wouldn't notice? And if, as everybody thinks, it would cause him serious psychological distress to know that his testicles are taken out. Possibly more psychological distress than it would cause a person without an intellectual disability, because they could sort of reason through it and cope with it in a way that a person with less reasoning and mental faculties might be able to cope with it. So I want to know what you would say to him. I would write the journal entry as I would write it as, here's what I would say to Mr. Mosley, Mr. and Mrs. Mosley. Here's your situation. Here are the options. Um, Here will be the consequences of each option. What would you like to do? So write it sort of in the first person, if you like, as if you're speaking to both of them. So the second part of the prompt is a song that I want you to listen to. And we're skirting into sort of medical humanities territory here, but I like that. I think that a big part of being an ethical medical or practitioner or medically adjacent worker is just being able to relate to humans. I mean, like a huge proportion of the ethical mistakes that are made in medical practice come from the practitioners just losing sight of the human element in their work. Right? Seeing people as numbers on a spreadsheet or as a medical chart that needs to be cleared or whatever, but not actually remembering the human element that exists in every case. There's a name for a related phenomenon called empathy fatigue, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like the idea is that humans have a sort of finite capacity to empathize with others, because empathizing takes emotional energy. You don't have infinite energy inside you at all times. And so after a certain period of empathizing with lots of people in very difficult situations, your empathy muscle just becomes fatigued, for lack of a better metaphor. It's too tired. It won't work just the way your bicep wouldn't work after you've just worked it out super hard for like 5 days in a row. It just isn't, the strength isn't there. And so you walk around in this sort of empathic haze where you see people who are suffering or in really difficult conditions, and consciously you know their condition is awful, but you can't generate inside yourself the sort of care and concern and resonance with them that you used to be able to, because you're sort of out of that. And in most cases, you just need a break. You need to go take a week off or something when this happens. But that sort of work style hasn't yet been adopted in the medical community, though I think it really does need to be. I think doctors and medical workers need to be able to say, okay, I've reached empathy fatigue, and now I've got to go do something else for a little while to recuperate it. Because that's really, in addition to your skills and your knowledge as a worker, your empathy is just as important a resource. So anyway, so all that to say, the thing that I want you to listen to, this song, is, I think, a good sort of empathy primer. Like, it reminds me when I listen to it what a lot of people are going through, what it's like to be on the other side of medical care all of the times. The song is by a band you've probably heard of called Death Cab for Cutie. It's off their album Plans, which is their best album. Some people might try to tell you that Transatlanticism is their best album, but those people are just posers. Plans is where it's at. And the song is called What Sarah Said. It's written from the perspective of a person who is in the ICU. It's not exactly clear from the beginning whether the person in the ICU is the patient or someone who's there with the patient. I think you can probably read the song in either way. Try to do that. Listen to it a few times reading it either way. But I've got the song in a link in the description of this video below. And I've got a link to the lyrics, which are really important because the songwriter for Death Cab for Cutie is just a fantastic lyricist, and that's where all the emotional meat of this song resides, is in the lyrics. So what I want you to do is just click on the link, listen to the song. You need to have headphones on or really good sound around you if you have it, like if you've got a good pair of headphones or whatever, or earbuds, or you've got a good speaker in your room. You need to crank the music up. Music is meant to be listened to at a pretty loud volume. Instruments are loud, and music has its effect on you when it's pretty loud, and can kind of push on you and overwhelm you a little bit. Crank it up, listen to it, and read the lyrics while you're listening. You can give it one go through if you just want to listen to the song first, but I want you to at least once in the end read the lyrics while listening so that you can make sure you really understand what's being said in the song. And in your journal, just sort of say what it made you think, what it made you feel, whether you thought it was good or just shitty and boring or whatever. It's not going to hurt my feelings, but try to focus your thoughts on the aspect of the song where it's depicting real experiences of other people on the other side of the medical sort of establishment. Um, Links below. So I've done the housekeeping. I've given you your prompt. Part 1 is Mr. and Mrs. Porter. What do you say to them? Write it out. Part 2 is What Sarah Said by Death Cab for Cutie. Check that out and jot down some reflections or response to it. And do the reading for next week, and you'll be good to go. As always, a reminder, if the reading doesn't have the little B star after it but has page numbers, it's still in the same book. So you have all the readings. And if it's something else, it's in that readings folder, the Google Drive folder that I sent you. Or it's in the files folder in Microsoft Teams. So we got some recommendations for you. One is two TV shows and a piece of software. The piece of software is called Notion, Notion, and it can just do anything. It's absolutely free. It's probably what I'm going to migrate all of my notes and files and personal writings and everything into, because it can just do anything. It's super simple. It can have spreadsheets and tables and journals and to-do lists, and it's just crazy. So it's like a one-stop place for all of your texts and links and files that you want to collect. It's just like an incredible piece of organization software. And if you need more organization in your life and don't yet have a system, I highly recommend that you check out Notion, because it can provide an incredible system that will make a lot of the clutter in your life orderly. And it's flexible enough that you can create the order in any sort of way that works for you. It's really important to find a system for getting things done and knowing where all your stuff is and all that. If I hadn't been able to do that in college, I never would have graduated college. So I would have been using this software in college if I had it then. Notion. I think the website is notion.so or notion.se. You can find it. The two recommendations for TV shows. One is totally relevant to this course. It's called Diagnosis, and it's on Netflix, and it's like very binge-worthy. It sits somewhere between like medical documentary and slightly trashy reality TV. It's hosted by It's hosted by a medical professor at Yale who writes a column for the New York Times where she covers cases that have come to her, because her specialty is being able to diagnose extremely difficult to diagnose illnesses. People have been through lots of doctors and have described their symptoms, and doctors either keep getting the diagnosis wrong or just come back with their hands in the air saying, I have no idea what is going on with you. She has an incredible track record of being able to figure out what's wrong with people and to get them help, the sort of medical attention that they need. And each of her columns is about one such case, and they're all fascinating. But the TV show is like her and the people who have these strange illnesses going through the process of figuring out how to treat it, figuring out what it is, and seeing that side of the medical world is fascinating and also really helps to generate empathy because you get to see just the shit people have to go through in order to just get treatment. Like, you got something wrong with you, you just want to go to the doctor and get, you know, get the advice that'll fix you, or the pill or the surgery or whatever it is that'll fix you and get back to your life. And there's so many people who just, that becomes their life. And there's nothing else they had but this complicated fight to just figure out the disease before they even have to can fight to like make it better. So if that intrigues you, it's a great show for you. Or if you just like watching like medical mysteries on TLC or whatever, this is like that, but really good. And the last show that I recommend to you, I'm binging it this week. I'm about to finish. Not all the episodes are out. I think there's going to be 10 episodes, but the 7th just dropped today, which I'm going to go watch after this. It's on HBO. It's a show called Raised by Wolves. It's like sci-fi, post-apocalyptic, humans, children being raised by androids, but all that sounds like nerdy and geeky, but it's just as good as like all the shows that HBO does, you know, Westworld and Game of Thrones or whatever. So, and if you haven't watched Westworld, you should definitely watch season 1 of that. But yeah, check out Raised by Wolves if you have an HBO Prime subscription, or if you know how to torrent. It's an excellent show. So I hope that gives you something to do for the rest of the week. I'm sure you're not lacking in things to do. As always, if you have questions or need help, message me on Teams. I can Zoom you if you want. We just need to set up a time. There's a few days during the week that I'm not super available, but I'm happy to talk to any of you about anything in the course. I hope that your week goes super well. Hope you're all healthy and happy and staying relatively sane in the midst of the strange world that we live in. So, all that, I'll see you next time.